Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Julian Pischeid and I am the CTO at Emerge. I'm just going to give a real quick introduction before we turn things over to our two presenters today. So today we are presenting context-driven experiences, how mobile is enabling personalization, wayfinding, and location-based services that can transform your business, presented by Aruba Networks and Emerge. All of us have had powerful experiences using location-aware technologies in our personal lives, using applications such as Google Maps, Uber, or Pokemon Go. But how can we employ these technologies in our places of business to benefit our customers and our employees? If, for example, you're on a corporate campus or in a hospital, what are the possibilities to improve the user experience of people visiting and working in those facilities? That is the topic we are going to explore today. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel. I'll bring them up during the presentation, and we will also have time for questions at the end. We'll also be sending you a recording of the webinar so you can rewatch it or share it if you found it valuable. The agenda today is we'll do these quick introductions. Then we have about 30 minutes to deliver you the presentation, and then we have 15 minutes for Q&A, and at the end we'll share the contact information of the presenters as well. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our two presenters for today. First off, we have Nick Newton from Aruba Networks, which is a Hewlett-Packard enterprise company. Over there, Nick leads the Aruba Meridian software group. The Aruba Meridian platform has been an industry leader in the mobile indoor navigation space for the better half of a decade, so we're very excited to hear Nick's latest strategies of how context-driven experiences can drive value within organizations. I'm also excited to introduce Jonathan Hensley, CEO and Chief Creative Officer at Emerge, where he works with clients to transform business strategies, user needs, and new technologies into valuable products and services. At Emerge, he has implemented context-driven experiences for companies such as Blue Shield of California, Mercedes-Benz USA, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and LinkedIn. With that, I'll hand the presentation over to Nick to kick things off.
All right, thank you, Julian. And hello, everyone, either listening live or watching the recording later. As Julian mentioned, one of the things that we're talking today about context and how context is really improving the different experiences we have. Now, taking a step back and thinking about what is context, what do we mean by that? And I think what we mean by that is some extra piece of information or some extra information that that really improves our experience in the different places that we go. And as Julian mentioned, we already do this today. We're already experiencing this today, and specifically around location and personalization to some degree. So think about in your daily life how often you look for information about what's around you. It might be a restaurant, it might be a store, it might be some kind of activity. But knowing what is nearby me based on my location, use that context of location becomes pretty important and adds to my experience. I might also track something. I might track something like a tile or track a thing so that I know its location. Knowing a thing's location also greatly improves my experience, especially when I'm late for a meeting and I can't find my keys. Then it's actually a pretty valuable piece of contextual information. Increasingly, I've experienced sharing my location, not with the entire world, but with friends and family when we're traveling or on trips or in different spaces. It can be very valuable to actually share my location and have others share their location with me. And then finally, we don't see this quite as much, but I think it's up and coming, is even automating different workflows or activities based, again, on the concept of location. So we see a little bit of it today coming in when you might get in your car after work and all of a sudden you get a push notification from Google or Apple or someone else saying, hey, it's 20 minutes home given current traffic conditions, right? So it knows something about me, it knows my location, it knows where I'm going, and it's providing some pretty valuable information to me right at the right moment in the right place at the right time. So all of these things, all of these pieces of context primarily location-based context, are improving our experience. I want you to take that and think about it in terms of some of the more indoor spaces that we spend our time in. In fact, not taking out how much we sleep and all that, we spend quite a bit of time in indoor spaces. That might be at work, if we're working. It might be at school if we're a student in a college or other kind of education campus. It might be in a hospital, which is also a workplace for the people that work there. It might be in some kind of large venue like an airport or a museum or a stadium or any of these types of convention center, like these large venues we go to. And then finally, it might be just shopping and retail. And each one of these places, location is really what's enabling the use case. So whether it's getting turn-by-turn directions to a conference room in an office that I haven't been in, whether it's finding my way to my clinic so I'm not late in a hospital, finding my way around a convention center, or getting to the particular product that I need in a large store, location is really that piece of context that can help drive the use case to improve our experience there. Oops, went too far. Let me get back here. Okay, so you got a little preview there. What's really bringing this together is our mobile devices. None of these experiences that I've just described could really exist without mobile. And increasingly so, right? So mobile devices started off having just internet connectivity, but now we have location services powered by GPS outdoors. We have connection to Wi-Fi and BLE, and other technologies which are coming in and will continue to come in, which allows not only us to access the world, but the world to provide a much more engaging and contextually more rich experience to us. And while it's pretty amazing to think about, what was life like before we had mobile devices, for better and for worse to some degree, but I think we still just scratched the surface in terms of the future and the different kinds of useful and engaging experiences that our mobile devices can provide us in all of the different places that we go. All right, so what does this actually mean? How does this come together? Let's get a little bit more into the actual meat of how these types of experiences are created. From Aruba, and specifically Aruba's Meridian product, we have a couple of different pieces. First is the infrastructure, especially in these indoor spaces that we were just talking about, right? You can't utilize ubiquitous GPS. That's not available. And so in order to have that location contextually rich experience, there has to be something else powering location. Now, the great news about Aruba is that it is in many, many of these places already, and becomes the idea of location really becomes this added value that can be added to an already existing infrastructure. So that's really the physical piece. On the other side is the software. The Aruba Meridian software, and that is the digital piece that can utilize or draw out that location context provided by the infrastructure. And now in the middle of that is our partners like Emerge, who are bringing this together. So ultimately, location is helping to bridge both the physical and the digital. And when you think about it, we kind of live in both of these worlds. We live in a physical world, like we do every day, but we also live in a digital world. When you think about how much time we are spending on our computers, on our devices, and we interact with the world very digitally. And location is really at the center of that. And being able to bring these two together is what our great partners like Emerge are able to do. Now, I can talk to you all day about how awesome this is and how cool the technology is and how everyone needs to, make some progress here. But you might be asking yourself, okay, what's the real value? what am I getting to get out of this? What's the ROI? And we really think about that value proposition with three groups. On the bottom of my slide, but almost really the most important, is the end user. We have to be creating experiences that end users find valuable, that are useful, and that they will continue to use. Even though as a vendor, we aren't necessarily selling to the end user all the time, that end user experience has to be first and foremost. We can get pretty excited about the technology because it is fun and cool. But if we aren't solving real problems, then it will continue just to be fun and cool technology. So we have to really continue to think about what are those end user problems and opportunities, and how can we ultimately address them. And we'll touch on this a little bit later in the webinar, but that's where the raw technology and capabilities provided by Aruba, combined with the talents, skills, and experiences of Emerge, really come together to create this great solution that's very customized and specific to a particular customer. So first of all is the end user. The second is all of the different line of business stakeholders that might exist. Now this might be facilities, this could be marketing, this might be an experience manager. We increasingly see patient experience managers, employee experience managers in a corporate campus, student experience folks, people that are really concerned with the experience ultimately of the people that come into that space. And they have their own goals and their own things they're trying to accomplish. And so this really helps them to further those goals. And then finally, this might be a little bit of a surprise, but it's critical from our perspective, is IT, in particular IT. Given that so much of this technology is tied to the infrastructure of a space, IT becomes one of the most important stakeholders to be on board. Now, they might not be the ones driving it. It might not even come out of their budget. But ultimately, they will be involved in deploying, maintaining, configuring, and just otherwise being involved with the infrastructure required to provide these types of experiences indoors. And so having them connected is always critical. And that's been one of the great things for us as the Meridian team, is being connected very closely with, clearly, Aruba, is that we often already have that concern taken care of. We're usually coming to the table with IT, or at least we certainly can address those concerns. And so it makes for a really great combination. So when we think about value and ROI, it's to these three groups that we are providing the value. Now, a little bit of background just on Meridian and how we got to where we are today, but not so much to give a history lesson or to bore you with the past, but more along the lines of this is where the market has taken us and where we see the market being and going. And so as you think about your own needs and your own future, this is something to definitely keep in mind, and to really ask yourself, are we keeping up to where the market is driving technology and these types of experiences? So we clearly started with an app ourselves. The mobile app of 5 years ago is sort of like the website of maybe 15 or 20 years ago. Everyone said, "Oh, I got to have an app." But then we started asking, the customers started asking us, "Yeah, so what? So we have an app, so what? What can we do with that?" We started using, again, the location context to really provide all of the valuable experiences that we're talking about and the ROI that was asked for. So we did maps, we did location, we added on a campaigns or push notifications and triggers tool. We went from allowing our customers to allow their end users to find places to then moving on to finding things. And that was really the natural extension of location services to an asset tracking product. And then finally, something that's talked about quite a bit today and we see customers exploring a lot is the whole idea around a smart space. So bringing together location, location of users, location of things, some amount of IoT. I know that's a total buzzword and we throw it around without time enough meaning, but bringing all of that together to create a smart workplace, to create a smart hospital, to create a smart stadium, to create a smart airport, to create a smart museum. And so all of this kind of comes together in that smart spaces. And that's where we are spending a lot of our innovation time right now, is thinking through and working with customers in terms of what are the different kinds of challenges and problems they're trying to solve in that context. So continuing on with that, you might ask, okay, well, where does a Meridian focus today? Where are those raw capabilities that a partner like Emerge is going to use to create this experience? Well, it really falls down into 5 main areas. The first is we have a very basic mobile app development and content management system. This is really for customers who are just getting started. It's not something we're going to talk about in this webinar very much, but it's a very, very light version of all of the much more rich value that Emerge is going to bring to the table, which is going to be much more applicable to the vast majority of customers. The second is the maps. Now, location, we talk a lot about location, but location doesn't mean a lot without maps, without a map. And maps go beyond just the basic, wayfinding and sort of navigation that you might think of in an indoor space, but they can be used for all sorts of different purposes and often are by customers. So having a very rich and robust mapping platform is for us kind of the basis of what Meridian is built on. From there is location and all of the different kind of capabilities that come with location. That might just be basic blue dot wayfinding. It might be friend sharing, or it could be automating different workflows like we talked about. So using location to add value in the many different ways which customers do that. It's interesting. One of the ones that I never would have imagined, but in an airport, we have a few airport customers who are using location to really facilitate the wheelchair experience, right? So they want to make sure that wheelchairs are in the right place at the right time, at the right gate, and then they get transferred to the next place. So to me, that was always an example of something that I never would have expected location to be used for, but it's providing a lot of value in one particular vertical. Next is our proximity-based campaigns and triggers. So as opposed to an XY location, there's some very interesting things that can be done around proximity. So knowing that you are in an area or near an area, and then either just sending you a basic push notification for promotional or educational type reasons, but going way beyond that to use that to kick off or facilitate different experiences. So you can think about in a hospitality setting, when a VIP guest comes through the door, knowing that they are near, knowing their proximity, could kick off a workflow where you greet them by name, provide them with a VIP experience. So that's one example. And then finally is, again, like I mentioned, going beyond finding myself or knowing my own location to knowing the location of things. We're spending quite a bit of time on our asset tracking solution. One of the things there is, asset tracking is not new necessarily, and we certainly do not claim to have a corner on the asset tracking market, but where we see our value really being is in utilizing your infrastructure, your Aruba infrastructure, to provide a great asset tracking experience without having to have an additional overlay network. That those other asset tracking vendors that do have an overlay network can provide some really amazing experiences. And when the need is there, that's absolutely the right way to go. But if the use case fits and you have an Aruba infrastructure, we can provide a lot of value sort of out of the box. So these are the core capabilities around context and specifically location-based context, which Aruba's Meridian product and Aruba provides. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan to tell you about how these can really be truly utilized to create these specific and engaging experiences for end users. So Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, Nick. So I think it's, with the amazing technology that's out there today to enable these experiences, at the end of the day, it's really all about taking this raw contextual data and creating really valuable experiences that meet the needs of people and solve problems for organizations. And so when we think about that, I think it's really important to start with understanding kind of the dimensions of contextual information that we're considering when creating a solution. So we look at 4 dimensions, most commonly with building contextual driven experiences. The first one is the goal of a user and what they're trying to accomplish. The second would be time. So whether it be time of day or the time the user has to complete a goal is really important. The location, which as Nick mentioned, if you're in an airport, right, you're moving very quickly, it's a loud environment, and you are trying to navigate a very large venue. There's a lot of location contextual information that needs to be taken into consideration. And then the 4th dimension is the user's state of mind or attitude. So again, how are you when you're traveling versus if you are in a hospital setting, maybe a very different state of mind and how you might be approaching the use of a contextual experience. So very important to take these different things into consideration. As we explore that and we go a little bit deeper, let's see here. Perfect, there we go. There's really 2 sides of the to take into consideration. The first is really the customer experience. So, how can we create contextually driven experiences that really improve, ways that you connect with customers, educate them, transact, maybe how they use your product or service today, how do you support them, or how do you retain those customers? And so these are major considerations. The other half of that are the employee-driven contextual experiences that are equally important and are really, driving a lot of innovation right now around as companies are looking to modernize their operations and they're really trying to increase performance to create that competitive advantage. So contextual-driven experiences are becoming huge to create that modern day workforce and create an environment that supports them to be at their best. And so we can think about contextual experiences around areas of recruitment, onboarding, as another example, communication or collaboration, product or service production and delivery, customer support, security. All of these are potential areas of opportunity for these contextual driven experiences, and there's many, many more. And I think what's really important then is to, once we understand the 2 areas of bigger opportunity in space, is to understand what is driving businesses to really invest into this, these types of experiences and building these kinds of contextually driven tools that really support the organization going forward. So I'm going to talk about 5 major drivers that are very common for a lot of businesses right now. And for those that are listening, I bet you 1 or 2 of these might really resonate, or things that you hear about as a leader or your leadership team talking about and really thinking about not just this year, but going into starting planning for 2020. So the first is around customer engagement. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers, 86% of buyers are willing to pay more for a great customer experience. And 76% of customers say they expect companies to understand their needs and expectations. And 57% of customers won't recommend a business with a poorly designed website or mobile experience. So this is really impactful on businesses. So while we look at the possibilities of technology, we're really trying to solve a critical need that businesses have to connect with customers in the best possible way on their terms. And it's really invaluable, and the research continues to support this, that we need to be thinking about how do we deliver these experiences and connecting with them in more personalized, location-aware methods. And that's really what contextually driven experiences are all about. The next one I want to talk about is self-service. So a lot of us are using go 1 step back here. Got a little teaser here as well on what's coming. Self-service enablement is another really big driver for organizations as they want to empower customers to more, drive their own path, It allows us to remove, barriers of operating hours or other considerations around the organization, and we can really empower customers to engage with the brand in many different ways, in many different levels. And if you're a subscriber to, Netflix as an example, it's a complete now self-service model business for entertainment, and a lot of things have gone that way over the last, several years. So really important. Another major business driver to take into consideration is the employee engagement. Interestingly enough, I recently just read a study by Gallup that high employee engagement was the critical success factor for many of the most successful companies today. And that research showed that there was 25% lower turnover with high engaged employees. 41% lower issues around quality and delivery of their product and service, and a 22% increase in profitability. So having a really engaged workforce, providing them experiences and tools and access to critical information, resources, and so on, is really driving organizational success. And this is a really powerful way to look at these contextual driven experiences and the value that they can provide. The next one is process automation. Nick talked about this a little bit, and we're not going to go too deep because it's a whole nother webinar in itself. But when we think about the opportunities with this information, being able to automate certain process to not just improve the employee experience, but it also allows us to really increase access to timely information for employees and organizations, and also is a really incredible asset when it comes to helping drive better decision making. So there's a lot of opportunity there where we can remove and rethink old processes to improve based on what the technology can now unlock. And last but not least is really understanding the value of business intelligence. Big data has been a huge conversation for years now. We've all heard about it to the nth degree. We've been collecting data for years. In some organizations' case, decades of information is existing. And now that big question: what do we do with it? How can we analyze it and get more valuable information? And when we think about contextually driven experiences, we're able to look at many dimensions of data that can help inform how we improve customer experiences, how we improve the operations of an organization, and certainly to inform that better decision making as well and unlock new possibilities. So these are really 5 of the core drivers that are really spurring leadership to look at these types of experiences and solutions to drive their organizations forward. So that's a lot. So let's unpack that a little bit with a specific example. So let's look at one of many possible examples here. And I'd like to talk about one that I think brings 2 pieces of what we talked about together. One is healthcare and focusing on the patient or family experience, or in this case, the customer of the hospital, is one really important side of this. And so if we start to think about, well, how can I create contextual experiences that support the patient journey and what they're going through, and in many cases, not just the patient, but all their family members or their caregiver is really important. And then the other side of that patient experience is the caregiver. So this is our nurses, our doctors, our the administration staff that supports them, that allows them to focus their time on the patients. And we're modernizing their workplace at the same time. So 2 huge opportunities to do that. So as we think about that, we want to kind of look at where are the opportunities, how can we start to think about contextual experiences and solutions. And so I'd like to share with you a framework that we use here at Emerge to help companies of all sizes. Doesn't matter if you're a small business or a Fortune 50 company, is looking at a couple of areas. One is, how do we assist the customer in their journey? What does that opportunity look like? The other one is, how do we augment the value of the experience and the product or service that's being delivered? And third is, how do we amplify, basically, how do we create additional value in that experience for patients? And all of this unlocks incredible opportunities to also enhance the employee experience. So as we think about this, just looking at the patient side of, there are ways to think about creating a contextually driven experience on your mobile phone with all of these incredible features and possibilities that Nick outlined, to think about, how do I assist, a patient and their family preparing for a visit to the hospital or to a clinic? How can I support them and assist them in arriving for their appointment? How can I support them in departing? And then, potentially, how do I provide reminders for non-visiting days? So as an example, as they're preparing, the app might know that there's that appointment is pending, and so might automatically make recommendations of when to leave to get there on time. That not only de-stresses the experience and provides value for the patient, it actually can let the hospital making sure that appointments are happening on a timely basis. None of us like to sit in a waiting room for 45 minutes, so we can be more timely and really think about that. And that has huge ramifications for both the patient and the organization. Arriving, maybe when you're arriving, you weren't aware that there's a valet service, and you actually don't need to worry about parking your car. The hospital is going to take care of this for you, and you can go straight to your appointment, and that'll be a guided experience. When we think of augmentation of how do we, really enhance the overall experience, you can also, by developing these experiences, think about ways that, for example, how can I maybe connect with a practitioner or my nurse in advance of the appointment? Maybe there's some preliminary questions or some information that you want to make sure that you have, so you can bring everything, to the hospital that's needed. Opportunities for enhancing the treatment as well when you're on site, and supporting follow-ups that might come along with that patient journey. And then again, how do we amplify the value of that service? So when we think about that, looking at what resources are available, a lot of organizations are trying to reduce paperwork. Healthcare is certainly notorious for having a lot of paperwork and a lot of compliance that has to be addressed. Making sure that you have that, information, those resources, those documents basically serve to you, instead of saying, oh, hey, if you're a patient, go to this general area and figure it out. We can serve that up and really bring, more value to the patients and their families, and we're actually creating efficiency for the organization. We're really creating an incredible win-win. Amplification of value is also things like amenities during your visit. If you have an extended visit, at a clinic or a hospital, maybe there's a Starbucks that's located inside, or maybe there's other amenities that they have access to. And so if you are having reoccurring treatment at a facility, maybe those are things you wouldn't otherwise ever know about, or maybe it's the cafeteria and allowing you to see the menu that's available that day. And if there's a wait in order to get food. So all of these, each one of these areas creates a huge amount of potential opportunity to create these amazing experiences for patients and to improve the organization. And when we think about how do we really want to deliver these solutions, it's pretty simple. We want to start with identifying where's the best use case where we can create the most value for the end customer, in this case our patients, and the organization. And that becomes your MVP, your minimum viable product, to really establish this contextual aware experience that allows you then to start to build out a platform that can look potentially something like this. So there's a couple of best practices that I wanted to share with everybody today from creating these experiences for organizations across multiple industries and areas. But one of the key things that sometimes can get skipped, and it sounds fundamental, but it's worth mentioning, is that it's always really important to, when you think about these contextually driven experiences and their possibility, is that it's aligned to your organizational strategy. So whatever your organization's larger goals are and that you're trying to achieve, look at how you can create contextual experiences to have amazing customer interactions, as well as modernizing the organization, and that it's anchored to that, because that's really going to be key to getting alignment and making sure that you can go through the entire process of creating something that's really going to get great adoption and support, not just internally, but aligned with the other work that the organization is doing. Another best practice that's really important is think about multi-channel user adoption. So sometimes an application will get built, but the value isn't realized until you have a certain number of users that are involved. To give one quick example, we had a client we were doing work for. It was for a corporate campus. They had multiple locations all over the country. They only needed to get 5% of their employees to use the app to have the service actually start to generate money for them. It was only 2% to actually break even on the initial investment. It was incredibly low, but the key thing was to get people to use the app. And so making sure that people are aware of that app, whether it's putting a sign out front or thinking about the different channels that you have to engage with your employees and customers, is really important to think that through. The next one is focus on reoccurring use cases. So making sure that there's a reason to use the app again and again. And that reoccurring usage of the application is not only going to help you with the success of your initiative and your program, but it's also going to really help you get more data that's going to be invaluable to unlocking insights around locations, maybe facility utilization, or how you can provide additional value to your customers. So that's really important as well. When we think about mobile, especially designed for simplicity, kind of the age of monolithic experiences and systems has gone away, and you see this really trending as we go into 2020. We want to create really beautiful but simple experiences that really serve each individual use case that you're trying to focus on. And then last but not least is keep the data side in mind as you think about these experiences. You have an opportunity to both really unlock incredible insights, both for the customer and internally for the organization. And there's a treasure trove of invaluable information that can be gathered through this technology and used to really optimize how you engage and work. And with that, I'll wrap up and hand it over for questions.
Thank you, John. Let's see. Questions. All right, here we go. In the example of the hospital, would I need a dedicated mobile app? Nick, is that something you want to tackle?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've had experience with customers taking all sorts of different approaches, and certainly respect the different thoughts or approaches that a customer would take. Our experience is that that native mobile app experience really does truly deliver the best value. Now, there's always a question of can it be downloaded? It can be downloaded, but how many people are going to download it? How much is it going to be used? And then, of course, we recommend and suggest lots of different ways in which it can be promoted and become part of a customer's workflow. Again, it kind of comes back to me to the idea of really solving problems and providing value. I had an experience a couple of years ago when one of our children were born that I was in a new hospital and that I'd never been in before, and I just had trouble finding the cafeteria. And I'm sure I probably could have asked or whatever, but it was busy and I was obviously occupied with this new life in our family, and ended up kind of going hungry for a day or two where I couldn't find my way to the cafeteria. And I kept thinking, if they only had a mobile app that I could download and use. Now, that's just one example, but in the places, especially the places that we frequent often, that having a native mobile app experience for those can be a pretty valuable tool.
Nice. Let's see, next question. Do you have a recommended approach for raising app engagement? Jonathan, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. So I think, there's a couple of different things. Let's assume that you're, in this case, developing an app that's going to be customer facing, or if you're in healthcare, it'd be patient facing. But I think there's a couple of key things. One of the things that we see a lot of times is it's just, somebody will put on their website, hey, we have an app, or they'll push people to an app, or when they have their responsive website, they'll have a little takeover that tries to push them to the native app. Those are great, and they have their usages, but I think there's a lot of other opportunities. One is, don't discount your physical space. Your physical space has an incredible presence for people. If it's their first time maybe coming to one, like a retail location or a hospital, let them make sure that they're aware and give them easy access to how to get that application. And then also there's amazing things you can do with multi-screen experiences. So imagine you come into the hospital and right in front of you is a kiosk that allows you to explore all of the services and the amenities that are available and can guide you. And you might be able to then bring up your phone, scan a QR code as an example, and it automatically launches the application, downloads and launches the application, and it's aware of exactly what you were just doing on the kiosk and can guide you from that kiosk to where you wanted to go, whether it be go grab a cup of coffee or find which floor you're supposed to be on for an appointment. There's lots of little areas across the experience that you can use to engage and really provide a tremendous amount of value, and it's important to look at all of those.
And John, I like what you mentioned there, and what that really drives home for me is the problem statement remains, right? It's there. That's persistent. It's really thinking about the different ways in which you can address that problem statement creatively to help people have or find the solution. So the kiosk example is a great one where, maybe people don't necessarily have a mobile app on their device, your mobile app, but you can help solve their problem in a way that actually solves it, but then leads them to use the mobile app or download the mobile app so that they can even have an even better experience the next time.
Yeah, I love that.
Great. Next question. Can my internal web application team build our customer app? Maybe both of you want to take a stab at this one?
Go for it.
Yeah, I get. Oh, yeah, sure. I start. I think again, we talk to lots of different customers that come to us in lots of different places, and our experience is, while if someone truly is committed, both from a resources and a funding perspective, to going down that path, we certainly applaud them. Our experience is that can be pretty challenging, and that's why partners like Emerge are especially valuable, not only for the experience that they bring and having done this multiple times for lots of different customers, so they can bring that, but also sort of the consultative approach, so that they can help you really think about the problem statements that you're trying to address, what the ROI is that you're trying to get out of it, and then build a solution that makes sense. I think there's lots of creative ways to ultimately get there, and long-term to maintain a solution, et cetera, but a lot of times time is one of our biggest challenges. And so, if we had 10 years to build a solution like this, maybe that would be a good idea, but most of us don't, and nor would we want to take that long. So that's why a partner like Emerge can be very valuable, is that they can help get a great solution off the ground fairly quickly, and to deliver real value when it's needed and where it's needed.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. The biggest driver is time. As you said, Nick, for a lot of organizations, and certainly an internal web applications team can be an invaluable part of the process. But I think there's also something to be said for bringing in providers who have just domain expertise in not just mobile development, but design. So a lot of the considerations for the user experience that we've talked about today, are a factor, and they certainly they require a really close collaboration between design and development. The most successful work that we see is when there's no silos between these functions in a team, and so it takes it takes a significant investment, I think, to really build that out. One of the strategies that we've seen to be really successful is starting with a partner, getting that first version of your contextual experience really up and running, and having a partner who can really collaborate closely with the internal teams, and so it's really bringing the teams and their expertise and the partner's expertise. I mean, we do this at Emerge quite a bit. We bring them together, and then that way we're actually helping the organization level up, shorten that time frame on their end significantly, but really helping them make sure they get a great product into the market, into the hands of their customers or in the organization. And then it's going to make sense at a certain point of time to have that taken over internally, but we want to create a path for success for that. And that's something that I think really has to be taken into consideration.
Thank you. We just got one more question in, and that'll be the last one we'll answer. When we think of user experience, there are people who don't know how to use an app, location, or wayfinding service. How can an app or service support this? John, you want to take a stab at that?
Julie, can you repeat the question for me?
Yes. When we think of user experience, there are people who don't know how to use the app, location, or wayfinding services. How can the app or service support this? Basically saying this is a new type of user experience paradigm, basically, that people might not be aware of and know how to interact with.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I can definitely speak to this, and I'm sure Nick can as well. I think that one of the key things, and this goes back to my earlier comment about the having the design experience to address this, is that some applications, you launch into them and they just kind of throw everything in the kitchen sink at you. And that's really not the way that you want to approach this type of work. When we talk about designing for simplicity in the use case, there's a couple of really powerful things that we can consider. If it's a first time experience, what does that first moment of that contextual experience look like? If we're using a great technology where we're already aware of a specific use case of bringing them into the application, into that specific series of steps and information for the first time, and we basically reveal the power of wayfinding, personalization, and that contextual awareness in an incremental way. And it really helps people build trust in the application, affinity for the experience, and in a way to actually understand and recognize the value of it without being overwhelmed.
And one of the things that you said earlier, John, that I really liked was simplicity. And mobile apps are meant to be discoverable. I mean, that's one of the core tenets of good mobile app design is discoverability. And so that anyone can pick it up and use it without having to do a training course, without having to read the manual. And again, that kind of comes back to me for why the services and the product that you provide, that Emerge provides, is so critical. Because that we say simplicity, you think simplicity should be simple, but it's actually not. It's fairly difficult. And so adding that amount of simplicity and discoverability to a mobile app experience is critical, but it can be challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last closing thought on that particular question is there's, I think this also with that type of scenario, if you know that your audience is going to potentially have some of these challenges where it's a new paradigm, as you mentioned from the question, Julian, for them, this is really invaluable where you really want to create solutions with your customers. So making sure that you can test your ideas, do early prototyping. This is just best practice 101 in any kind of product development, whether it be physical or digital. Get them involved, create some early prototypes, get some stuff in their hands, let them, instead of making assumptions, let them help you validate that you're addressing their needs in a really thoughtful way that's going to get that user adoption, that's going to help you realize that business case, and at the end of the day, hit that business driver that you're aiming for.
Wonderful, thank you. With that, we're on time, so we'll wrap up. Jonathan, Nick, anything else you'd like to add from your end?
This is Nick, nothing from my end. Yeah, look forward to one of the most exciting experiences for us, and I imagine for Jonathan it's the same way, is working with customers. We always love hearing your use cases and your challenges and your ideas on how to solve them. And so it's always the exciting part for us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar. You can reach Jonathan and Nick via email or Twitter. It's up on the screen. And we appreciate you being here. As a reminder, the recording of this webinar will be available on our website. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.